saw them build their illegal factory on my land, documenting all the infractions as they thought that I was just a pushover. Little did they know that I was conspiring their demise with every foundation that they laid. What would you do if your HOA's greed turned into the perfect trap for your revenge? I endured the roar of heavy machinery before I heard it from my kitchen window. Standing there holding a coffee mug, I stood there and watched as a yellow bulldozer headed down the line of my property. My 3 acres of woodland had belonged to my family for generations, long before Maple Ridge Estates, with their same-colored mailboxes and grass-length ordinances, appeared next door. The bulldozer operator waved to someone I couldn't see. Then, Diane Thompson came into view, her sharp pantsuit a sharp contrast to the muddy construction site as HOA president. She clutched her clipboard like a weapon. "They can't just steal your land," my daughter said, standing beside me at the window. "Can they?" I smiled. "No, they can't, but they sure think they can." The first letter had arrived 6 months ago, a friendly letter about my neglected natural area, making an aesthetic eyesore on the community. I chucked it into the recycling bin. The second letter was community standards and $100 fine. The third was on suing. Yesterday's letter was different. The Maple Ridge Homeowners Association is thrilled to announce proposals for a new community workshop on the empty parcel on the east boundary. My parcel, my land, my trees. I laced up my boots and went outside. The cool autumn air was filled with the scent of freshly turned earth as I walked towards the property line where Diane stood over workers placing survey stakes. "Good morning," I said. "Sounds like you people are lost about where your land ends." Diane turned her, smiled tight, and practiced Mr. Mitchell. "So glad you're here. We're simply marking the comedy expansion zone." "That's cool," I answered, keeping my level of tone, while with anger beneath because this is my own property. She laughed, a quick, dismissing sound. "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding on the revised community map. This wooded area was always meant to be common area. Your deed just says your house lot." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of my survey. "My deed covers the 3 acres altogether, including this woodland. It was in my family before your development." Diane's smile never wavered. "Our attorneys have reviewed the case. The initial developer had envisioned this for community use. We just correcting an oversight." She gave me a document. "This amendment to the bylaws voted on last month." The document had signatures I was unfamiliar with, and referenced a meeting I had not been invited to. At the bottom was a rough map with my woodland marked as Community Phase 2. "I am not part of your HOA." I told them I never signed your covenant. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Actually, when the last owner sold the next lot to the developer, there was a provision that all of the linking features would be part of the association. You've been a member as soon as you bought your house. You just hadn't been going." This was a complete fabrication. My family had owned this house for 60 years. "I'll have to discuss that with my attorney," I said calmly. "Of course." Deanne's voice was laced with insincere sugar. "But our complex is already approved and financed. We're breaking ground next week for the community workshop." As I walked away, I noticed survey stakes planted 50 feet onto my property. This wasn't about a few feet of boundary disagreement. They wanted a third of my property that night. As darkness fell, I sat on my back porch watching firefly dance over the trees. They planned to cut down my phone, rang my old friend Harold from the county records office. "Jack," I dug up that property question. He said to me, "There's something fishy going on. Someone filed an amended plat map last month showing your back acreage as common land, but the documents are questionable. The signatures don't match older records." "That's what I figured." I replied, "Can you send me copies?" "Already did." And Jack, they pulled out construction permits using that amended map. They're moving fast. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began composing emails to my lawyer, to the county commissioner, to the state board of real estate. This was not my first property battle in my 40 years as a surveyor. I'd seen all the tricks developers use to steal land they didn't own. A knock at the door interrupted my concentration. I opened it to find Eleanor, his 20-year neighbor, standing awkwardly on my porch. "Jack, I must inform you of it," she whispered, glancing nervously around. "I went to the HOA meeting this evening. They're going to break ground on Monday, permit or not." Diane told everyone. Your demonstrations are nothing but a delay technique and that you've actually signed over to sell them the property that is a falsehood," I protested. Eleanor nodded. "I know, but everyone assumed she believed her, the plans they showed us. Jack, it's not just a workshop. There's a small factory involved some furniture company related to Diane's brother. They're funding HOA money to build it after Eleanor left." I walked my property line with a flashlight, examining the survey. Stakes each had been hammered deep into my ground, marked with readings that had no correlation with any legal survey. I was aware of then. I had an option. I could take them on in a straight-up fight. March into their gatherings, demand justice, file injunctions promptly. That's what they anticipated, what they were ready for, or I could make them think they were prevailing the next morning. I observed from my kitchen window as laborers started opening a narrow corridor through my woods. I photographed them, but did not confront them. When later Diane walked by, slowing down to see if I would attack her, I just waved nicely. Her confused expression was the first enjoyment I'd had in days. That afternoon, I visited my attorney, Sandra Lee, with my deed, the original survey of the property, and the suspicious papers Diane had given me. "They're reaching awfully far," Sandra said, scanning the documents. "This is not a boundary dispute. It's attempted property theft, maybe fraud. I want to let them keep going." I told Sandra. She looked up quickly. Why would you let them build on your land?" "Because I want them to invest in their mistake, every dollar. They put in every tree they cut down, every foundation. They lay it all increases what they'll owe when finished." "That's risky," she cautioned. "Once they've established a foothold on the land, they won't." "I'm documenting everything, but I want them sufficiently relaxed that they make bigger mistakes." I leaned forward. "Sandra, this isn't concerned with my property. They've been intimidating all who don't fit their perfect community image. Eleanor got fined for cultivating vegetables. Marcus was forced to disassemble the ramp he put in for his dad. They have to be stopped, once and for all." Sandra sighed. "Okay, all right, we'll prepare everything, but not submit yet. I'll record their intrusions and document the damages." "But Jack, there's a difference between strategic patience and waiting too long." In the next 3 days, I photographed all the vehicles that drove onto my land, recorded all the workers who trimmed my trees, and documented all the hours of unapproved work. I gave daily reports to Sandra, but did nothing to stop the construction on Friday. There arrived a cement truck to substandard footings for their shop. I was standing close to the edge of my yard, watching Diane pulling up in her luxury SUV, clearly stunned to see me so relaxed. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, striding toward her with pretentious alacrity. "I was nervous when we didn't hear from you. Have you had an opportunity to review the documents?" "I have," I said, smiling. "It's been eye-opening." Her smile didn't quite reach. "Then you get this, project is a go. The community voted. So I heard a unanimous decision by your minutes exactly," she said, relieved. "Visibly, the workshop will be a great asset. I'm sure it will be." I agreed. "By the way, who is Thompson Custom Furniture? I saw that name on a few of the delivery slips." Diane's eyes grew wide for an instant before she regained composure. "Just a community supporter. They'll be having classes." "How sweet of them." I smiled. "Well, don't let me hold you from your activities," as Diane dashed off to speak seriously to the construction foreman. I recognized my suspicion to be true. This wasn't just an HOA overstepping its bounds. It was something much more sinister that night. As darkness fell upon my dwindled woodland, I was emailed by the county permits office. The HOA's building permit had been flagged for inspection due to boundary inconsistencies and issues regarding ownership. The trap was being set. Now all I wanted was for my neighbors to see what was really happening before Diane Thompson and her board built their unlawful factory on land that had been in my family for generations. Blood coursed through my head as I stood there, observing cement mixers spewing out the foundation onto my property. Early Monday morning, in contempt of the county permit office flat in their application building continued unabated. They were racing against the clock, hoping to build enough of a structure that demolishing it would be legally complicated. I sipped my coffee, my camera clicking relentlessly to capture all this. My phone rang with a text from Sandra, meeting at 2 p.m. County Commissioner showing up to a flawless. The pieces were fitting together. "You're just allowing them to construct," my daughter's voice startled me. Jen had encouraged from the city after my news of the ordeal. At times, you have to give people enough rope. I told her. She shook her head. Dad, they're stealing your property right out from under you while you're snapping photographs. No, they're investing tens of thousands into a mistake that will cost them everything. I pointed to my phone calendar. County Commissioner meeting today. State Real Estate Board investigation tomorrow in Veer. Are you going to do something about justice? I told her in no uncertain terms. But I need evidence of who else they've bullied by noon. My dining room was a war room. Jenny helped me sort through papers while I prepared for the county meeting. The sound of construction reminded me of what was to be lost. A truck with the Thompson Custom Furniture logo pulled up outside to the construction site. A man who was a dead ringer for Diane showed up waving enthusiastically at that half-built building. I zoomed in on his face with my camera. That's the brother. Jenny cried out. I nodded. Robert Thompson. I dug up on him 3 business failures in the last decade. Each time scamming investors out of their money at 1:30. We went to the county administration building. Sandra greeted us by the parking lot. They filed for an emergency work continuation today. She insisted that any delay would be a danger to public safety. Bold action. I responded, desperate action. She interrupted. The commissioner doesn't like being coerced. The meeting room was small, but filled to capacity. Diane and Tom had the front table with an unfamiliar stranger I did not recognize. Presumably, their attorney, Commissioner Davis, a straightforward commissioner, with 30 years in local government study papers in front of her on the table. This emergency meeting addresses the disputed building. At 1423 Forest Lane, she initiated. I realize both property owners are present. I stood there. Jack Mitchell, Commissioner, the real property owner. Diane's attorney interjected. If I may, Commissioner, the Maple Ridge HOA has evidence that the property in question would be used by the community, according to the initial development plan. Sandra placed our file of documents on the Commissioner's desk. My client has original titles, property surveys dating back 60 years, and receipts for tax showing. He paid property tax on all 3 acres since he came into possession of the land when his father died. Commissioner Davis read through them, her expression darkening. These appear to be in order, Mr. Mitchell, Miss Thompson. Your union's claim seems to be founded on an amendment filed only last month. Can you explain the timing? Diane smiled confidently. Of course, when reviewing historical documents, we discovered the original developer plan was that woodland would function as a community space. When the neighborhood reached a certain size, we've just activated that sleeping provision. That's fascinating. I broke in. With regard to the original developer was my father, and there is no such provision, Commissioner. Davis raised an eyebrow. In addition, Sandra added, we have evidence showing the amended plat map, forged signatures, and backdated approvals. The Commissioner held up a hand. Serious charges. I'll need to read all documents carefully in the meantime. I'm issuing a stop work order effective immediately. Diane jumped to her feet. Commissioner, we've already spent over $50,000 on this project. The community workshop will provide educational opportunities for your brother's furniture business. I asked gently. The room fell silent. Dean's face turned red. That's irrelevant, she stuttered. Robert Thompson is a community partner providing equipment. Is that why the building plans provide for specific production space and shipping areas for a community workshop? I circulated copies of the architectural plans across the table. Plans Jenny had obtained from an old friend who worked for the architectural firm. Commissioner Davis looked over the plans with a frown. This expression looks like it's a commercial manufacturing facility, not a community center. Diane's attorney whispered in her ear urgently. She squared her shoulders. The business finances, the educational offerings. It's a public-private partnership on stolen land, with HOA money, without approval of the members. Sandra mentioned we've received letters from some HOA members who were never informed. Their dues would be spent on subsidizing a private enterprise. The Commissioner rubbed her temples. The stop work order stands. I'm referring this matter to the county prosecutor's office for investigation of possible fraud charges. This meeting is adjourned outside. Diane cornered me in the parking lot, her husband Tom hanging around nearby. You have no idea what you've done, she hissed. This project means everything to us. To you. Perhaps, I replied calmly. not to the community you claim to serve. Tom stepped closer. We can make this worth your while. Mitchell, name your price for the land. It's not for sale. Diane's expression hardened. Then prepare for war. The HOA has resources you can't even start to dream about. By the time we're done with this, you'll be drowning in legal fees and violations. I smiled relevant threat, especially with witnesses present. I gestured towards Eleanor and some of the other neighbors who had been at the meeting and were now standing there watching our conversation as Diane and Tom stormed away. Eleanor approached hesitantly. That was amazing, Jack, but they won't stop, I'm hoping. Rachel's words poured out. They're destroying documents following today's meeting. Diane and Tom went back to the HOA office and started ripping up records, financial reports, meeting minutes, voting records, anything related to the workshop project. That's interesting, I said, but why tell me? Because they signed my name on the updated plat map. Her hands trembled. I could be arrested, and I've been copying all of this stuff. She placed the folder on my table, including bank statements showing they've been using HOA funds to fund Robert's previous failed business endeavors for years. Jenny, who had been standing in the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. You realize this is evidence of a crime. Rachel nodded sullenly. I know, but I never thought it would go this far. They told all of your relatives had agreed to give the land years ago, that you were going back on a promise your father had made as thunder boomed outside. I read the documents. Rachel had brought undeniable evidence of years of financial incompetence and overt fraud. The workshop project was merely the boldest of their schemes. Will you issue a public statement? I asked the prosecutor if it came to that. She spoke softly, but they can't imagine that it was me. Diane has contacts throughout the county. Her cousin is an agent for the county's largest real estate company. Her college roommate is a member of the banking commission after Rachel left Jenny, and I spread out the new evidence on the dining room table. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing at the windows as though nature herself was expressing outrage. This is bigger than I ever thought, Jenny said, reviewing bank statements showing embezzled HOA funds in the hundreds of thousands. Power corrupts, I retorted, considering my neighbors who'd been bullied and lied to for years. But it makes one careless, too. My phone rang. Sandra, Jack. You need to get to your property line right away, she exclaimed urgently. They're rolling equipment back in through sheets of rain. I could see the lights of construction equipment. Despite the storm, despite the stop work order, they were still constructing. Get video. Sandra barked. This is contempt of a county order. I grabbed my raincoat and took along my camera. Jenny lagged behind, carrying an umbrella. Both of us splashed out into the muddy yard to the building site in the downpour. I could see Diane, Tom, and Robert standing under a tarp with the building foreman near a concrete truck. A concrete truck stood idling nearby, its drum turning slowly. You're defying a county stop worker order, I yelled over the storm. Diane turned around, her face contorted with rage when she saw me. This is an emergency pour. The foundation will be destroyed if we don't do it tonight. That's not my problem, I said, firing everything. The commissioner's order was clear. Robert stepped forward, rain streaming down his face. Do you have any idea what's at stake? I've invested everything in this project. My equipment is already ordered. You paid for stolen items, Jenny cried. That's your fault, not ours. Tom staggered towards us, slipped in the mud. The commissioner will reverse her ruling tomorrow. Our lawyer is heading down there, first thing. Good luck with that, I said, going on to tape. Especially after the prosecutor reads your financial records. The three Thompsons were immobile. Diane's eyes narrowed to a slit point. What financial records? I smiled but said nothing. Let them guess how much I knew, how much proof I had already gathered. The construction foreman approached, looking uneasy. Miss Thompson, I can't defy a county mandate. My license would be at risk. We'll double your fee, Robert blurted hysterically. I raised my camera to take his bride's picture. Try. The foreman stepped back, hands up. I'm out, he said. Find someone else to jeopardize their business. As the foreman instructed his men to block the area and leave. Diane moved close to me, her voice a venomous whisper under the storms. Rumble, this is not finished. Mitchell, that property will belong to us, and when we are finished with you, you'll regret ever resisted us. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating her anger. twisted face in stark relief against the black sky. In fact, I said softly, I think you'll find this is only the beginning. The rumble of heavy machinery roused me at dawn. I leapt out of bed and grabbed my camera and pajamas. 6 men in hard hats stood at the edge of my woodland, pointing and surveying their incursion on my land stop. Right there, I bellowed, marching back and forth across my degated lawn, my heart racing, but my voice steady. This is private property. The construction foreman, a tall foreman with deep creases outside his eyes, appeared surprised to see me. I held out my deed and property survey, being careful to take a photograph of him standing there. Ma'am, I don't want trouble, he said, scratching his goatee, but I do have permits signed by the county and the HOA. Look for yourself. He pulled out documents with what looked like official stamps. I looked at them closely, taking phone photos. These permits. I bet she did. I explained to her, but she doesn't own this property. I do. And I issued an injunction this morning to stop this work. This was not the case, though, but I had to delay. The foreman frowned and took out his phone. Let me call the client. While he walked away, I patrolled the property line, taking videos of the survey stakes they'd moved. I saw 3 neighbors watch from their windows. Good. I required witnesses. Diane's silver SUV braked at the curb. 15 minutes later, she strode toward me in her designer exercise clothing face, red with anger. What do you think you're doing? She bellowed, pointing a finger toward my chest. Take down your injunction immediately. The community needs this workshop. Your selfishness is holding us all back. I kept calm, however my hands shook a bit. There's no injunction yet, Diane, but there will be. If you begin excavating on my property, your property, she laughed. The HOA has easement rights. Read your bylaws. Tomic luxury car pulled up, and he sat with us fidgeting in his business attire. Let's all just chill out, he said, staring at the other neighbors who had come to watch Mitchell. We've already spent $200,000 on this venture. The board used reserve funds. We can't stop now. Reserve funds without membership approval, I asked naively, loudly enough for everyone to hear. That's against the bylaws, isn't it? Their eyes widened at the same time. Tom grabbed Diane's arm, whispering something in her ear. We'll wait one day. Diana explained the workers' technical issues. She nodded in my direction. This isn't complete. Your games will cost you. As they drove away, my old neighbor Frank shuffled over. You've opened a hornet's nest, he whispered. Diane's been conspiring for months. I overheard her at the clubhouse say your property was perfect for some big project. I thanked him with the news and spent the afternoon making calls to each HOA member in my Rolodex. By nightfall, my phone rang non-stop, with neighbors relating stories of the HOA's bullying. Some were angry at me for causing a ruckus. Others expressed sympathy. At 7:00 p.m. Eleanor appeared on my doorstep, glancing over her shoulder nervously. They scheduled an emergency board meeting, she whispered. I shouldn't say, but they're going to start constructing at dawn in Junction. Or not. Diane says you're going to be served with so many fines. You'll have to sell. Thanks for the advice. I said, asking her in for tea after she departed. I phoned my lawyer, James. They're going ahead tomorrow. We have to record everything. Are you certain you want to let them progress on your property? He asked. We can halt them now. No, I said, let them dig further themselves. We had timed for 2 hours till midnight. I'd moved my old pickup truck to block the only access road to my woodland and placed cameras and trees circling the property. I barely slept, watching my cameras I'd placed in my kitchen at 4:58 a.m. Headlights flashed on my cameras. 3 trucks and a bulldozer headed my direction. I called James, whispering, they're here. I'm 5 minutes away, he said. Continue recording. I watched in horror as the bulldozer pushed my truck out of the way, like a toy. The metal groaned as it rolled over headlights. My hands were shaking as I focused on the driver's face and the solid logo on the door. The bulldozer tore up my property line, destroying century-old trees. Each fallen tree trunk was a gut punch, but I continued filming evidence. That's what mattered now. When the sun broke fully, I went out. Diane stood next to her SUV, watching the devastation with a smile when she saw me approaching with my camera. Her smile vanished. You're trespassing, I told her, and destroying private property. The police are on the way. We have permits. She flashed, but I saw her hands jiggling nervously, her car keys fake permits. I told her the county confirmed it an hour ago. Just then, James pulled up with a police officer. Diane's face turned pale as the officer began questioning the construction crew. James handed me a thick envelope emergency injunction. He whispered, signed by Judge Peterson this morning, and something else, the workshop they're building. It's not in the community. I came upon the business license application. It's for Diane's brother's furniture factory. My heart pounded with the revelation that this wasn't just about taking my land. It was about building a private company on HOA funds. The puzzle pieces fit. The bulldozer's engine sputtered halfway through devastation as the police officer ordered work to stop in the sudden silence. Birds sang again in the trees that still stood. I watched as the confusion erupted, camera still rolling. The destruction to my home was crushing, but each uprooted tree, each scoop of stolen earth, would now serve as evidence in a case that would bring the HOA's corruption to light. They thought they were crushing me instead. They were building my case. My dining room table disappeared beneath stacks of paperwork. 3 weeks had elapsed since the bulldozer razed my home, and fate battle had grown bigger than I could have ever imagined low. Stories of HOA misuses, unauthorized assessments, discriminatory enforcement, fictitious violations. They denied my proposal to build a wheelchair ramp for my mother, said Sophia, a nurse who lived on the corner, then approved Diane's third-floor addition without a permit. I poured more coffee for everyone. We need more than threats. We need proof, which will stand in court. The doorbell rang. James. My attorney walked in with boxes of documents. The judge signed our discovery motion. The HOA will have to provide all financial documents for the past 5 years. We all applauded, but James raised his hand. There's more. The building didn't completely cease. They're continuing to build at night. I grabbed my jacket. Let's go. Check 6 of us jammed into cars and drove to the edge of my property. Sure enough, there had been dumped the groundwork for a large building circled with security fencing, with nary a trespassing sign on my property. They're betting we won't be able to prevent them from doing it before it's done. James said once constructed, they'll claim hardship if mandated to take it away. I was angry, tears brimming up. They don't just take my land. And Sophia put her arm around me. They've been taking from all of us for years, but now we're fighting back together back at my place. We formed committees. Marcus would lead the financial investigation. Eleanor would gather testimonies from other residents. Sophia would document bylaw violations. James would coordinate our legal strategy. What about me? I inquired. You're our secret weapon. James replied. Diane believes you're fighting alone. She doesn't know about us yet. Late that evening, after everybody had left, I was sitting on my rear porch seeing the construction lights sparkling through the trees. My phone vibrated with a message from an unfamiliar number parking garage behind the mall, 10 a.m. Tomorrow, bring a recorder the next morning. I nervously waited in my vehicle, wondering if I'd made a mistake by not coming alone. A tap on my window made me jump. It was Tom, Diane's husband, and the HOA treasurer. I shouldn't be talking to you in public, he stated. Getting into my passenger seat, his hands shook as he dropped off a flash drive on the dashboard. Diane has no idea I'm here. What's this? I asked for all financial records, board meeting minutes, the actual plans for your land. He looked haunted. I did not sign up for fraud, but I'm in too deep. They're using HOA funds to build a private manufacturing business, a furniture factory for Diane's brother. The community workshop story is just a cover. Why are you telling me this? I asked suspiciously because they're coming for my neighbor next. Mrs. Watson, she's 86, and they're claiming her house is over new height restrictions. They want her land for parking. He didn't look well. I can't do this anymore. You'll testify, I asked him. He shook his head. I'm unable, but that drive has plenty to bring them to a halt. He opened the door of my car. I was never here. I saw him hurry away, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. This altered everything back home. James and Marcus went through the files. This is more than we had hoped for. James said recordings of Diane discussing the factory plans, emails about driving residents out, bank transfers to shell companies. We can shut down the construction now, I said. Or Marcus looked thoughtful. We could let them finish it. We all turned to him. Consider, he continued. Right now, they've trespassed and damaged property. But if we let them complete a commercial complex on stolen land with embezzled funds, the penalties would be much worse. James finished, eyes widening, and you'd have a much stronger case for taking ownership of the building they constructed on your land. Let them hang themselves, Eleanor murmured. I looked out the window at my devastated property. The trees were gone, the land marred, but something new was forming. Not a structure, but a case that would topple the corrupt HOA leadership. How long do we wait? I asked James until the ribbon cutting. He said let them celebrate their victory before we bring it all crashing down. That afternoon, a certified letter came. The HOA was fining me $500 a day for interference with community enhancements. Attached to it was a lien notice on my home. I should have been afraid, but was strangely not. They thought they were pushing me into submission, not knowing that every threatening letter, every illegal construction day was making their case weaker. That evening, a reporter from the local newspaper called someone had tipped her off about the battle. Would you like to put your side? She asked. I smiled into the phone. Not yet, but keep your calendar open next month. I think you'll want to cover the grand opening of our new community workshop. As I hung up, I realized our strategy had shifted from defense to offense. The factory they were building on my stolen land would soon become the evidence that brought the HOA falling down, and perhaps the very asset that would get our community rebuilt the right way behind every wall they put up. Deliberately rerouted. See these new cut marks. Someone did this just days ago. My heart dropped. Can we establish who? Maybe, she said, nodding towards a small mark etched on one pipe. That's a contractor's mark. I can tell you exactly who put this in years ago at my place. Neighbors hung around my dining table. Our war room, maps, papers, and laptops covered every inch. The mood was gloomy. We're short of cash. Mrs. Abernathy yielded. The legal fees are bankrupting everyone, and without the workshop generating money, we can't pay. The suit tossed. Marcus, a knock at the door, halted us. Rachel entered, white but firm. I discovered something, she gasped, releasing a flash drive onto the table. Tom created backup copies. All of it's here. Bank wires, payoffs to the inspectors, even blackmail evidence they employed on board members who questioned them. Hope darted across exhausted faces as my computer cycled the files. Spreadsheets, emails, photos, a complete record of years of corruption, and at the bottom of one folder, Mitchell Property Contingency Plan. I opened it up. Inside were photos of my land with survey stakes dated 3 years ago, a contract with a logging company, and most damning emails between Diane and a county official talking about how to reown my property without my knowledge. They've been planning this for years. Eleanor gasped. And that's not all. Rachel continued, pulling out her phone. Jeff called me at the airport. He's leaving the country, but he wanted me to record his confession. First, we sat in stunned silence as Diane's brother laid out how they were going to harvest my timber, build the workshop with HOA funds, then sell the business to a furniture conglomerate for millions, none of which would go back to the community. My attorney stood up. This changes all. We have enough for criminal charges today. But what about the workshop? Asked Mrs. Abernathy. It's still flooding on Mitchell's land. I saw the faces in front of me, neighbors who had become friends and allies in this fight. I have a feeling 2 months on, under clear blue skies, we gathered once more at the workshop, now reborn. The building had been repaired, redone, repurposed, a new sign hanging over the door, Maple Ridge Community Center and Workshop. The judge granted our motion. Yesterday, my attorney informed the crowd, Diane and Tom will receive 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. The county official who helped them has been fired and charged, and the best of all, they have to pay restitution to all of the people who were hurt. Cheers erupted from the gathered neighbors. Children played on new playground equipment. Where timber once stood threatened in the workshop area was still present, but next to it was a community room, a small library, and gathering spaces. Eleanor now. Our official HOA president presented me with a frame document. Your conservation easement. Your woodland is now protected forever. No one can ever develop it. Not even future HOA boards. Marcus patted me on the back. You could have just battled them off your property. Instead, you allowed them to construct something we could all utilize once they had left. That's planning ahead. I sat and watched as families wandered through the center, making it their own. The building was never the issue I made it out to be. Who was in charge of it and why? As the sun set, Rachel sat down beside me on a bench facing the pond behind the center. "There's something I never shared with you," she said quietly. "The day that remained in my mind when I decided to help you was when I heard Diane talking about your daughter's wedding, how she deliberately scheduled road construction that weekend, so your guests would not be able to travel to your place. I remember that day, the frustration the guests arriving late and disarrayed remained 4 years ago. She has been aiming at you that long." Rachel nodded. "I never recognized why until I saw those papers. Your ground was ever the trophy, later strolling home along my woodland." I paused where Diane initially placed survey stakes years back. The trees still stood upright. Now legally protected birds built nests where machinery might have destroyed everything. Eleanor came to greet me on the path. Some neighbors would like to put plaque. "Thank you, no plaques." I smile. Just in functioning HOA, working for people, not over them. "Fair enough." She smiled anyway. "I still can't get over your patience. You let them construct that entire workshop, knowing the entire time you'd own it." I gazed at the community center lights peeking through the trees. I didn't just desire my land back, I wanted to free the whole neighborhood as we walked back towards homes that were now free from tyranny. I thought of Diane sitting in her prison cell plotting revenge that would never come to pass. She thought she was stealing my land, but ultimately she'd built exact what our community needed on my terms, not hers. Sometimes, the sweetest victory is in halting your foes. It's allowing them to construct their own downfall, while you quietly set yourself up for a future they'll never be a part of. A pushover, little did they know I was plotting their downfall with every foundation that they laid. What would you do if your HOA's greed was the ultimate trap for your vengeance? I could feel the heavy machinery rumble before I heard it standing at my kitchen window, with coffee cup in hand. I watched a yellow bulldozer creep along the side of my boundary. My 3 acres of woodland had belonged in my family for generations, prior to Maple Ridge Estates coming along next door, with their identical mailboxes and restrictions on lawn length. The bulldozer operator nodded at somebody I couldn't see. Then Diane Thompson came into view, her crisply tailored pantsuit standing in relief from the mud-covered construction zone as HOA president. She wielded her clipboard as a club. "They can't just take your property," my daughter asked, standing by the window with me. "Can they?" I smiled. "No, they can't, but they certainly act like they could." The first letter arrived 6 months ago. A courteous epistle about my unruly natural area's aesthetic blight on the community. I tossed it in the recycle bin. The second letter warned community standards for a $100 fine. The third threatened action. Yesterday's letter varied. "The Maple Ridge Homeowners Association is appreciative to make announcement of offers for a new community workshop on the empty lot along the eastern boundary. My parcel, my land, my trees." I laced on my boots and went outside. The cool autumn air carried the scent of freshly turned dirt as I crossed the property line where Diane stood overseeing workers placing survey stakes. "Good morning," I yelled. "Seems like you people are lost about where your land is." Diane smiled tightly. "Practice, Mr. Mitchell. So glad you're here. We're just staking the committee expansion area." "That's interesting," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage boiling beneath because this is my own property. She laughed, a short, derisive sound. "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding according to new community map. This wooded parcel was always to be common area. Your deed only applies to your house lot." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of my property survey. "My deed includes all 3 acres, including this. Woodland. It's been in my family since before your development existing." Diane's smile did not falter. "Our lawyers have reviewed the situation the original builder had in mind for community use. We simply filling a gap." She handed me a document. This amendment to the bylaws was voted on last month. The document had signatures I was not familiar with and referenced a meeting I was not invited to. On the bottom was a rough map with my woodland marked community, Phase 2. I am not part of your HOA. I explained to her that I never signed your covenant. Her eyes narrowed slightly, actually. When the previous owner sold property next door to the developer, there was a clause that all surrounding properties would be incorporated in the association. You've been a member since you bought your home. You just have not been participating. This was a blatant lie. My family owned this property for 60 years. I'll need to go through that with my attorney, I said. Casually, of course. Diane's voice was laced with fake sweetness. But our project's already funded and approved. We're building next week for the community workshop. As she walked away, I noticed survey stakes pounded 50 feet into my property. This wasn't a couple feet of boundary problem. They wanted a third of my land that evening. As night began to fall, I sat on my back porch and watched Firefly leap between the trees. They're going to cut down my phone. Rang my old friend Harold in the county records office. Jack, I looked into that property matter. He said there's some kind of suspicious activity going on. Someone reported an updated plat map last month where your rear acreage is labeled as common land, but the records are questionable. The signatures don't match old records. That is what I assumed, I replied. Can you send me copies? Already did. And Jack, they got building permits based on that updated map. They are aggressive. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and began composing emails to my attorney, to the county commissioner, to the state real estate board. This wasn't my first real estate dispute out of my 40 years as a land surveyor. I'd seen every trick builders use to grab land. They had no right to a knock on the door. Interrupted my work. I opened it, and there was Eleanor, my 20-year neighbor, shifting awkwardly on my front porch. Jack, I must caution you, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. I attended the HOA meeting tonight. They're going to break ground next Monday, permit. Or not. Diane told everyone your protests are just a delay tactic and that you've really signed to sell them the property. That's not true, I said. Eleanor nodded. I know, but everyone believed she thought she believed her. The plans they had shown us, Jack, it's not only just a workshop. There's a bit factory involved, some furniture business that's related to Diane's brother. They're building it with measurements that did not correspond to any legal survey I was aware of at the time. I had a choice. I could attack them head on, march into their meetings, call for justice, file, initiate injunctions. That's what they expected. That's what they were prepared for. Or I could make them believe they were getting the better of me. The next morning, I watched from my kitchen as workers began to cut a thin path through my trees. I photographed, but did not approach them. When Diane rode past, later slowing down to see if I would pounce on her, I just waved smilingly. Her confused expression was the first joy I'd known in days. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer, Sandra Lee, with my deed, the original property survey, and the suspicious documents Diane had given me. They're overreaching. Sandra said, examining the papers, this is more than a boundary dispute. It's attempted property theft, perhaps deceit. I would allow them to keep going, I told her. Sandra glanced up hastily. Why would you let them build on your land? Because I want them to invest in their mistake. Every dollar they spend, every tree they fell, every foundation they pour, all of it contributes to what they'll owe. Once it's done, that's hazardous. She cautioned, if they get a foothold on my land, they won't. I'm recording it all, but I want them loose enough to make bigger mistakes. I leaned forward. Sandra, this isn't about my land. They've been threatening all the people who don't quite fit their vision of the ideal community. Eleanor's been fined for having a vegetable garden. Marcus was made to rip out the ramp he had built for his father. They must be stopped permanently. Sandra sighed, all right. We'll arrange everything but not file yet. I'll record their intrusion and document damage, but Jack, there's a breaking point to strategic patience and waiting too long over the 3-day period. I lost it. Every car that drove on my property registered every worker who pruned my trees and logged every hour of illegal labor. I reported every day to Sandra, but didn't make a push to cut off construction on Friday. A cement truck pulled up at Poor Foundation's workshop for their workshop. I was on the edge of my yard, watching Diane pulled up in her luxury SUV, clearly surprised to see me so calm. Mr. Mitchell, she said, approaching with mock concern. I was worried that we didn't hear back from you. Have you been able to review the paperwork I have? I answered with a smile. It's been enlightening. Her smile dipped for a moment. Then you see this project is going to happen. The people voted, so I heard a unanimous decision. By your minutes, verbatim. Exactly, she said, relieved looking. The workshop will be an excellent addition. I'm sure that it will be. I agreed. Incidentally, who is Thompson Custom Furniture? I saw that name on some of the delivery slips. Diane's eyes widened for an instant before she composed herself. Just a community partner, they'll be holding classes. Ah, how sweet of them. I smiled. Well, don't let me get in your way, as Diane hurried off to speak under her breath with the construction foreman. I knew my gut feeling had been correct. This wasn't about some controlling HOA, but something more nefarious that evening. When darkness fell upon my dwindling woodland, I received an email from the county permits office. The HOA's building application had been flagged for review. Due to boundary discrepancies and ownership questions, the trap was being set. Now I just needed my neighbors to see what was really happening. Before Diane Thompson and her board built their illegal factory on land that had been in my family for generations. Blood pounded in my ears as I watched cement mixers pouring the foundation on my land early Monday morning. Despite the county permit office flat in their application, construction continued. They were racing against the clock, hoping to establish enough of a structure that removing it would become legally complicated. I sipped my coffee, my camera clicking steadily to document everything. My phone vibrated with a text from Sandra meeting at 2 p.m. County Commissioner attending perfect. The pieces were falling into place. You're just letting them build my daughter's voice. Startled me, Jen had driven in from the city after my updates about the situation. Sometimes you have to give people enough rope, I replied. She shook her head. Dad, they're literally stealing your land while you take pictures? No, they're investing thousands of dollars into a mistake that will cost them everything. I showed her my phone calendar, county commissioner meeting today, state real estate board investigation tomorrow, environmental impact review Wednesday. Jenny's eyes widened. You've been busy, I've been patient. I corrected, there's a difference. The doorbell rang. Eleanor stood on my porch, wringing her hands. Jack, I'm so sorry, she blurted. They called an emergency HOA meeting last night. Anyone who opposes the project will face significant special assessments for community improvements. People are scared. I invited her in. Have they threatened you specifically? Are you planning justice? I said simply, but I need evidence of who else they've bullied by noon. My dining room had become a war room. Jenny helped me organize documents while I prepared for the county meeting. The construction noise provided a constant reminder of what was at stake. A truck bearing the Thompson Custom Furniture logo pulled up to the construction site. A man who looked remarkably like Diane emerged, gesturing enthusiastically at that half-built structure. I zoomed my camera to capture his face clearly. That's got to be the brother, Jenny said. I nodded. Robert Thompson. I looked him up. 3 failed businesses in the last decade, each time leaving investors empty-handed at 1:30. We drove to the county administration building. Sandra met us in the parking lot. They filed for an emergency work continuation this morning. She said claiming any delay would create a public safety hazard. Bold move, I replied. Desperate move. She corrected the commissioner. Isn't pleased about being pressured. The meeting room was small, but packed. Diane and Tom sat at the front table, with a man I didn't recognize. Presumably their attorney, Commissioner Davis, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years in local government study documents in front of her. This emergency session addresses the disputed construction at for 1423 Forest Lane. She began. I understand both property owners are present. I stood. Jack Mitchell, Commissioner, the actual property owner. Diane's attorney jumped in. If I may, Commissioner, the Maple Ridge HOA has documentation showing the land in question was designated for community use in the original development plan. Sandra placed our evidence folder on the commissioner's desk. My client has the original deed property surveys dating back 60 years and tax records showing he's been paying property tax on all 3 acres since he inherited the land from his father. Commissioner Davis reviewed the documents, her expression darkening. These appear to be in order, Mr. Mitchell. Miss Thompson, your association's claim seems to rest on an amendment filed just last month. Can you explain the timing? Diane smiled confidently. Of course, when reviewing historical records, we discovered the original developer intention was for that woodland to become a community space. Once the neighborhood reached a certain size, we've simply activated that dormant provision. That's fascinating, I interjected, considering the original developer was my father and no such provision exists. A murmur ran through the room. Commissioner Davis raised an eyebrow. Furthermore, Sandra added, we have evidence suggesting the amended plat map contains forged signatures and backdated approvals. The commissioner held up a hand. Serious allegations. I'll need to review all documentation thoroughly. In the meantime, I'm issuing a stop work order effective immediately. Diane leaped to her feet. Commissioner, we've already invested over $50,000 in this project. The community workshop will provide educational opportunities for your brother's furniture business. I asked quietly. The room fell silent. Diane's face flushed. That's not relevant, she stammered. Robert Thompson is a community partner providing equipment. Is that why the building plans include dedicated production space and shipping areas for a community workshop? I slid copies of the construction plans across the table. Plans Jenny had obtained through a former classmate who worked for the architectural firm commissioner. Davis studied the plans with a frown. This appears to be a commercial manufacturing facility, not a community space, Diane's attorney whispered.